Last week, on the same day, former President Trump was indicted for mishandling classified information, and current President Joe Biden was credibly accused of taking $5 million as bribery from Ukraine. So, who will get prosecuted? Is the justice system corrupt? What about Hillary's emails? What does ancient wisdom have to say about a situation as complex as this? Well, let's just kind of talk through a little bit of the details. I'm sure most of you are up to speed. I know some people just don't follow politics at all. And honestly, you probably live a better life than the rest of us. But Trump has an ongoing investigation into mishandling of classified documents. He had a lot of things that he took after his presidency, which is apparently quite common. He had them at Mar-a-Lago. The National Archives were trying to get them. And what is now being alleged in this indictment is that he did some shady stuff, having people lie, saying that they'd given everything when they hadn't, that maybe he had stuff moved around. The other thing that the indictment is accusing, now this is all allegedly, because this has to get proved out in court, but it is alleging that he took classified documents and showed them to multiple people. And there's actually recordings or tapes of some of this where Trump is like pulling out top secret attack plans on another country or something, and is even saying, these aren't declassified. I could have, but I didn't. And look at this, and don't get too close to it. And he's kind of doing the Trump thing. And this kind of like breaking the rules and living in the gray and kind of doing whatever he wants. This is what made Trump famous. This is why a lot of people really love Donald Trump. And, two things can be true at the same time. If you are on the right, you're a Trump fan or a conservative, you don't really care who it is as long as a conservative gets elected in 2024. You can hold both of these things in your head at the same time. Number one, if what is being alleged is true, Trump was very careless. He is known as a prideful person. This is kind of how he became famous. This was his marker: hubris, arrogance, his name up in golden letters. And yet there are reports from the inside that he's the kindest guy and treated his workers really well. He's a bit of an enigma, He's one of the most famous people on earth and has been for a very, very long time. And this kind of brash, do what I want, a lot of people are attracted to that. It comes off in the right circumstances as charisma. But if we're going to be nuanced and honest, we should be able to say, pulling out classified information, showing it to people without clearance, just to prove a point or to do something cool, it's very careless. And when you know that there are a lot of people who are more than happy to try to build a case against you for anything that you do, which is true of people on both sides of the aisle. There are people who would love to see your downfall. Man, you can't give people ammunition like this. So we can hold two things true. One is that this was reckless and careless and possibly even dangerous, depending on whether or not the veracity of all of this is proved out in court. On the other hand, you can also see that just like it seemed like weeks after they raided Mar-a-Lago to try and get his documents, it came out that his rival on the other side, Joe Biden, also had a ton of classified information that was not being stored properly. That was definitely mishandled. It was in his office in Pennsylvania. It was in his office in DC. It was in the garage of his home, like next to his Corvette. And then Vice President Mike Pence, the most milquetoast politician in the world, he had classified documents. And this is apparently just a difficult thing, something that often happens when people leave office. And one of the things that strikes me as someone who tends to think organizationally and in processes and procedures is that there's a real lack of clarity of what people can and cannot do in these situations. And really the most damning part of the indictment isn't just mishandling these, having these boxes not secured or not where they're supposed to be, or not turning them over in time. Because if that's the case, then, Joe Biden is in just as much trouble. The real issue seems to be intentionally mishandling. That's what's being alleged. And showing classified information to people who didn't have that, which makes it way more analogous to Hillary Clinton and her emails. And the issue with Hillary, it came down to an investigation where James Comey at the end of it said, yeah, I mean, this is what happened. She had these on a personal server. He actually said there is a high probability that foreign countries now have access to the thousands of digital documents that she was storing in an illegal fashion. And it was proven that she used bleach bit, which is a code to basically hide any of the evidence when she thought she might be prosecuted for it. So those seem to be a little bit more analogous, and she ultimately wasn't prosecuted. And so, man, the thing that has people really concerned is if the Department of Justice and if the sitting power, which right now is on the left, is going to use the justice system in order to quash the main rival and the leading candidate of the opposition party. And that's concerning because that is what you see in third world countries, undeveloped countries, dictatorships. This is what you see in banana republics. And it's a very dangerous precedent to set because once a precedent is set, it does get followed, which is why, there was like almost no impeachments. And then one guy got impeached. And then now we're like impeaching people left and right and always talking about it. It's always in the zeitgeist. We should impeach him. We should impeach him. That used to be a really serious thing. Well, if this becomes a precedent, then everyone who comes out of power is all of a sudden going to be in danger of the new political power investigating and using the full force of the law to try and prosecute them. I don't think that's a precedent that we want to set. At the same time, we do want justice to reign. We want things to be fair. And carelessness, which it seems, if true, is one of the big mistakes that was made by Trump and his team here. It's spoken a lot of in Proverbs 14:16. It says, "The wise fear the Lord and shun evil, but a fool is hot-headed and yet feels secure." You have to feel pretty secure to pull out classified documents and show them to people don't have clearance. Like that's just a level of hubris that is unhealthy. In Proverbs 22:3, it says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." It's like, people want to investigate you. People have a vested interest in this. And you just keep going and you handle things carelessly and you kind of do what you want. It puts you in a very dangerous situation. On the other side of this, the same day that Trump is indicted, it comes out in the House of Representatives some proof that at least seems credible on its face that the Biden family and possibly Joe Biden himself were involved in some kind of bribery scheme with Ukraine. Now, just like we have to wait for things to play themselves out in Trump's situation, we have to wait for things to play out in this situation to see what is actually what. But the one thing that does seem without question is that members of Joe Biden's family have been leveraging the Biden name in order to be put into positions that they have no right being in, picking up huge sums of money from companies in foreign countries. And at the least, it is concerning. And people will point at that and say, well, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, they did something similar over in the Middle East during the time that Trump was president. So corruption is rampant in our politics. Like, if you don't know that yet, it's just time to wake up. Most of our politicians are quite corrupt people. They're incredibly self-interested. They're narcissists. They're incredibly arrogant. And so this is what we get. And so now the House is going to investigate Joe Biden and find out if he really is the big man who's getting a $5 million cut of these bribes. Now the Department of Justice is going to investigate Trump and see if they can pin him on some of these charges of espionage and mishandling and keeping what's it called? Not disinhibiting, but obstruction. There we go. Obstruction of justice. They're going to try to get him on all of these different things. And man, bribery is obviously a terrible thing as well. Scripture speaks to this in the Proverbs. It says, "The wicked accept bribes in secret to pervert the course of justice." That's what a bribe does. It perverts the course of justice. In 29:4, it says, "By justice, a king gives a country stability, but those who are greedy for bribes tear it down." If you're willing to sell out, sell secrets, sell influence, anything that takes a bribe, it perverts justice and it signals the beginning of the end of your reign of power. And so it's interesting trying to stand in a nuanced position and see the reactions on both sides to all of this news where both of our leading candidates are being accused somewhat credibly of these like big things, it's interesting on both sides. When the other guy on the other side gets accused, the first reaction is like, we got him now. Everyone gets really excited, like, "Oh man, we're going to impeach him and throw him in jail. Oh man, we're going to throw Trump in jail. He's not going to be able to run anymore." It's like this, like just basking in the glow of finally catching them, immediately followed by the realization at the core, none of this is actually going to happen. Both sides react that way. We finally got Trump. We finally got Biden. Yeah, they're going to jail. Yeah, we're going to impeach him. And then 5 seconds later, like the reality dawns on them and they realize how these things normally unfold. And then they go, I'll believe it when I see it. Probably nothing is going to happen. And I think if you try to hold somewhat of a nuanced position, I'm not saying to not have your political ideas. I certainly have mine and you should have yours. What I am saying is maybe one of the takeaways from this is we should think about electing non-corrupt like adults, like putting people in positions of power who are not narcissist, power-hungry individuals. The fact that the two men who are most likely to be our next president and who also happen to be the current and former president are both always in all this different levels of corruption and mishandling and mistakes and everything else. And maybe you think your guy on your side is completely innocent. That's fine. But man, it's like, how did we get to a government of the people, by the people, for the people, to millionaires and billionaires who have so many conflicts of interest? It just seems wild. But this is where we are. And now we're going to see the courts and the legislator try to hammer through all this and figure all of this out. And one of the things that people are most concerned about is a two-tier justice system. What's also interesting, if you try to hold a nuanced view, is the left and the right both think there's a two-tier justice system, and they both think it's against them and for the other person. And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle there. Impartiality is essential for our republic to hold together. In Deuteronomy 1, it says, do not show partiality in judging. Hear both small and great alike. Do not be afraid of anyone, for judgment belongs to God. And that is kind of the crux of where we're at as a country. Do not be afraid of anyone. If you're a Republican, don't be afraid of Biden. If you're a Democrat, don't be afraid of Trump. For judgment belongs to God. God will ultimately judge. And yet we have a hard time believing that and hanging on to that because as a country, we don't believe in God anymore. And even a majority of people who believe in God at some level, God is not the centering priority of their life. And because we don't have a Christian ethic and a Christian frame, we don't have any like transcendent grounding for our life. Our politicians, they are our gods now. Politics is our religion now. And so it's not just my guy might get impeached. It's not just my guy might, go to prison. It's like my Lord and Savior, Joe Biden, is being persecuted. My Messiah, Trump, is being persecuted. That is such a dangerous place to be as a country where we don't have any hope outside of the here and now. So we pin all of our hope onto the most corrupt, self-interested people imaginable. I don't know. I don't know what will come out. I don't know what they'll be able to prove. And it's gonna be interesting to watch as all of this unfolds. There's a parable that Jesus tells in the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. And before you guys jump on me in the comments like, oh, that's not the actual interpretation of this parable, you're right. This isn't. This has a completely different interpretation in the context of the Bible. But I do think there is wisdom in this passage that could be useful to us as we think through what to actually do in this situation where our two leading candidates are completely like embroiled in controversy and possibly different levels of corrupt. So this is what Jesus said. He presented another parable to them. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while people were sleeping, his enemy came, sowed seeds among the wheat and left. And when the plants sprouted and produced grain, then the weeds also appeared. And the landowner's servants came to him and said, Master, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Then where did the weeds come from? An enemy did this, he told them. So do you want us to go and pull them up? The servants asked. No, he said, when you pull up the weeds, you might also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I'll tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and tie them in bundles to burn them, but collect the wheat in my barns. So wheat and grain. Potentially what we have is, we just have a bunch of different kinds of weeds right now if we're talking about all of our different politicians. But I'm sure if you're on the left, you think Joe Biden's the wheat and Trump's the weeds. And if you're on the right, you think that Trump is the wheat and Joe Biden is the weeds. the wisdom of this parable is give it time. Let these things play out. And if I were king of the universe, I think that either like everyone just has to go to prison, like all of our corrupt politicians, which honestly, everyone goes, we start over, we get some normal, like spiritually mature, actually mature adults to run our country. That might not be the worst thing. Like Hillary Biden, like let's just all of them, can we do over? Can we just throw the deck out, do over? That's not going to happen. So probably the best thing that we can do is wait and let the people decide on this. This is the government of the people. So this is probably an unpopular decision on both sides. The people who are really staunch on the right are like, get Biden out of there, throw him in prison. And people really staunch on the left are like, get him out. Let's let the primary happen. Let's not just throw political opponents in prison. Let's let it happen. Let's see if Trump actually gets it. If he does actually get it, let's let him run it out. Let's trust people. And I know there's a whole nother side of this that we're not going to talk about today. Can we even trust the voting system? And, I don't know. Probably. So let's let it play out, because all of a sudden, if you just start getting in there and trying to rip out your opponents, you're probably going to damage yourself too. Because if you're on the left and all you want is to see Trump go to prison, you better be sure that all of your people are completely clean too. Because odds are, if we set that precedent, the next time the other side gets in power, they're going to come after their opponents as well. I don't think that's the country that we want to live in. I don't think that's wise. I think that we need to take seriously the corruption that is around us and start taking seriously putting people in power who actually have our best interest in mind, and who actually have some level of moral clarity and integrity. And, if you are a believer, the next year and a half up into the election, it's going to be incredibly contentious. So the last thing is, do not lose your witness over your political opinion. Do not lose friends. Do not lose family. Don't give up your life and your calling by Jesus to be a light in this world over your political opinions. Even the kingdoms of this world will fade and crumble someday. The kingdom of God that we're on earth to build, that will last forever. So have your opinions and hold to your convictions, but not at the cost of your calling.